Welcome to Modeling Mathematics in Middle School. Let's get started. We value your time and appreciate your active participation during this module. Here are a few suggested learning norms to make the most of your time. If possible, work in an environment with as few distractions as possible so you can engage and reflect. Take notes and jot down ideas and questions as needed. Lastly, use this time wisely to ensure your professional learning with university instructors is productive. By the end of today's module, participants will be able to define mathematical modeling and understand its importance, differentiate between mathematical modeling and other approaches, learn strategies for effective incorporating modeling activities into your classroom. Here is our agenda for today's module. Why mathematical modeling? Incorporating mathematical modeling. Final reflection. Summary of learning. Mathematical modeling is an important component of the mathematics classroom as it offers students a bridge to connect abstract mathematical concepts with the tangible challenges of the real world. But what is it? And more importantly, what does it look like in the middle school classroom? Mathematical modeling is a process that uses mathematics to represent, analyze, make predictions, or otherwise provide insight into real-world phenomena. It's the process of choosing and using appropriate mathematics and statistics to analyze practical situations, better understand them, and improve decisions. If this process is practiced throughout middle school, students will be more successful in high school math classrooms. Mathematical modeling involves observing real-world phenomena and formulating a mathematical representation of the system. But how do we even know where to start or how to find a solution? The modeling process is a systematic approach. Please pause the video to review the process shown on your screen. Notice that many of the arrows are bidirectional, which speaks to the iterative nature of the modeling process. Models can have a wide range of complexity. More complex does not necessarily mean better or correct, and students can usually work with simpler models to achieve good results. In fact, it's often better for students to start with a simple model and then build up the complexity by iterating through the steps in the modeling process until the model accurately describes the real-world application. Mathematical modeling promotes deeper conceptual understanding by contextualizing abstract mathematical concepts within real-world scenarios. It helps students connect concepts they've learned previously to new situations. It fosters critical thinking skills, encourages creativity, and cultivates students' ability to apply mathematics to solve authentic problems. Modeling challenges students to consider problems from various angles, encouraging them to be leaders in their own learning and explore multiple points of view when finding solutions. As students engage in modeling activities, they analyze, justify, and refine their models, developing teamwork and communication skills, essential 21st century skills. The practice of mathematical modeling equips students with the skills needed for success in college and various careers, which often involve applying mathematical concepts to solve complex, real-world challenges. By incorporating modeling activities into your instruction, you'll empower students to see the relevance and applicability of mathematics in their everyday lives, thereby increasing students' buy-in to math class. Some educators mistake all word problems for mathematical modeling tasks. However, there are some very specific criteria for math modeling. Mathematical modeling requires students to apply math concepts and use critical thinking to answer questions instead of simply following instructions or replicating procedures in isolation. Students benefit from using math manipulatives in all kinds of math situations. However, In mathematical modeling, students use manipulatives to explore real-world questions. When completing modeling tasks, students have the opportunity to pose questions and then refine their models to solve real-world problems instead of relying on graphs, equations, or functions to solve plain math problems. And possibly one of the most exciting things about mathematical modeling tasks is that there are multiple approaches or answers, which supports the diverse learning and thinking styles of our students. Solving word problems is not considered to be the same as mathematical modeling. Mathematical modeling tends to be a more complex process involving identifying questions to answer about the real world, making assumptions, identifying variables, translating a phenomenon into a mathematical model, assessing the solution, and iterating on the process to refine and extend the mode. The process to solve a word problem isn't necessarily as complex, as the problem itself usually gives the reader the question to answer and the information necessary to answer it, and doesn't require modeling's level of meaning making and interpretation. These differences are relative. However, depending on the abilities of the student and the nature of the solution required to answer the problem. Let's take a look at the type of word problem your students might be asked to solve. Notice that the numbers needed to answer the questions are all there, and there is no extra information. Students don't have to think deeply about the problem, even though there is a real-world connection. There is only one approach to finding the answer, and there is only one possible answer. This word problem is not an example of mathematical modeling. Now, on first glance, this problem seems like it might require mathematical modeling. Some additional variables to consider are included, and this is definitely a real-world problem. However, all of the numbers needed to solve the math problem are provided. And although the question is open-ended and appears to give students the opportunity for creating multiple iterations of a model, there's actually only one mathematically correct answer. Driving the extra distance to buy gas at the station off your route only makes sense if it results in spending less money. This application problem is more interesting and requires deeper thinking than the word problem, but it's still not mathematically modeling. Take a moment to look at this mathematical modeling problem. What do you notice right away? If you said, there are no numbers, you're right. Students have to state the problem that needs to be solved, identify the variables, make assumptions, and then figure out the best way to solve it. Then once they've done that work, they can refine and extend the model before sharing their models with the whole class. Can you imagine the conversations that will happen in your classroom when students are allowed to engage in this type of exploration? Let's watch a brief video about the problem of driving for gas. Although the students in this video are actually teachers, notice how the teacher of the group sets up the problem and the discussions that ensue.
This is the problem of driving for gas. The basic structure is there's a route that you normally take, and there's likely to be some gas stations close to that route which sell gas for some price. That's the most convenient. But there's oftentimes a gas station several miles off your normal route that's selling gas for significantly less. And so the natural question is, under what conditions would you want to drive the distance to the farther gas station to purchase gas? So one of the first questions I ask my students, because they're sort of comfortable with this scenario, they may have cars, they've certainly been in cars and understand the time and effort it takes to go purchase gas. And you'll notice one of what I'm asking them to do, we want you to work on this problem for the next 5 or 6 minutes, just again to brainstorm it. What I'm asking them to do is to make a PowerPoint presentation of 4 slides, again, sort of limiting what they have to present. But what I'm interested in is, imagine they're going to make an app for their smartphone that someone could use to answer this question. What are the assumptions you're making that go into your model? That's one slide. What is your mathematical model? What have you computed? that's going to be used by the cell phone, and what is the presentation they have where they put in the information, what information do you ask from them, and what information do you give back to them. Okay? So we're going to be looking at just the basic part of the problem. Given this question of when should you drive off your path for gas, but what I'd like to do is just put on the table what are the important considerations that you've come up with. Miles per gallon of the car that you're driving. So that information needs to be known.
Do you mean like it's 2 cents difference? I'm not going to waste it. It's 50 cents. I might actually make sure.
So the difference in gas prices and the difference in time.
Is that different from knowing the two prices? Would you rather know the two prices or just the price difference?
You're using up some of the gas that you bought to get back from that station, right? So that's not really usable gas.
The fundamental question is how far away, how far is the station that's not proximate to your path, and the result of that is you got to use gas to get there. One of the things that I ask the students to do is to try to, again, just as before, specify a particular example of this problem. And one way of thinking about this is to ask them, suppose your teacher had given you a word problem based on this idea. Could you create the kind of just standard word problem that he or she would give you and solve that? Okay, just turn it into something that they're comfortable with, turn it into a specific example of the general problem. Okay. So you might want to think about, can you draw a diagram of the problem you're trying to solve? Okay. We always want to have them start with the simplest version of the problem that contains the essence of the problem. Try to strip away as much stuff as you can, but still contains the features that that each of these still has some meaning and effect on the problem. So take a minute and draw a picture of the problem you're trying to solve. Again, to think about your students, they'll draw lots of different things. There are a lot of sort of triangles. One of the things I try to get them to do is to draw something simple, to try to make it as simple as possible. For example, something like this. I'm going from home to school, school to home to school, school to home. There's a gas station A that's on the route, so it doesn't cost me anything at all to get there. There's a gas station B that's off the route. I've got to get to the gas station and get back to my route and then continue. Once I solve the simplest version of the model, then I want to make it more realistic. But I don't want to start with the more realistic problem to begin with, in part because it may in fact be too realistic and I struggle with solving it. If I can't solve the simplest version, I'm not going to solve the more complicated version. But more fundamentally, the insight that I get by solving the simplest version is oftentimes very, very easy, makes the harder problem just a modification of that earlier solution. And that's the whole idea of the modeling cycle, is to get a solution. That solution becomes new information. And you start from a different place than you did originally, and you keep adding in reality as you go through rather than trying to create a fully realistic model initially. That's one of the things students struggle with, and you have to really work with them on. So I draw a picture of it, and then I just turn it into the problem my teacher would give me. Simple numbers, 5 miles, $3, $2.85 a gallon. Can I solve this problem? Can I create a car where the answer is?
Let's reflect. When you think about the benefits of incorporating math modeling into your classroom, which do you consider to be the most important for the growth of your students and why? Pause the video and jot down your thoughts. Here are some possible responses you may have written down. Deeper conceptual understanding. Contextualizes abstract concepts. Connects previous learning to new situations. develops critical thinking skills, encourages creativity and multiple perspectives, cultivates students' ability to use math to solve real-world problems, fosters collaboration and communication, shows students the relevance of math, prepares students for the future. We now know why incorporating mathematical modeling into your classroom is important for students' growth as mathematicians. But how do you do it? Let's find out. There are many ways to incorporate mathematical modeling into your middle school classroom. Real-world problem-solving tasks. Present students with a real-world scenario, such as planning a budget for a family vacation or designing a geometric structure. Ask them to apply mathematical concepts to solve the problem and create models to represent their solutions. Hands-on manipulative activities. Provide students with manipulatives like pattern blocks, algebra tiles, or fraction bars. Ask them to use the manipulatives to explore mathematical concepts such as geometric transformations, algebraic expressions, or fraction operations. Mathematical simulations and technology tools. Use interactive simulations or educational software to simulate real-world phenomena or mathematical concepts. For instance, students can use graphing calculators to explore functions or conduct virtual experiments to understand probability and statistics. Graphical and symbolic representations. Have students create graphs or draw diagrams to represent mathematical relationships or patterns. Additionally, ask them to translate verbal descriptions into symbolic equations or expressions to model mathematical situations. Role play and simulation games. Engage students in role-playing activities or simulation games that require them to apply mathematical concepts in realistic scenarios. For instance, students can simulate a business venture, conduct a scientific experiment, or plan a city infrastructure project. Project-based learning tasks. Design problem-based learning tasks that represent students in authentic, open-ended problems that require mathematical modeling to solve. Encourage students to work collaboratively to investigate, analyze, and propose solutions to real-world challenges. When selecting modeling approaches, consider the learning objectives, student needs, and available resources to ensure alignment with instructional goals. Diversify methods for incorporating math modeling by varying real-world tasks, hands-on activities, simulations, and projects. Encourage flexibility and creativity in implementing modeling activities, allowing students to explore multiple approaches and find solutions that resonate with their individual interests and strengths. Modeling competencies develop over time, so focus on overall competency while addressing specific areas of the modeling process. Align assessment methods with modeling goals, emphasizing problem solving and real-world application. When incorporating mathematical modeling, you don't have to start from nothing. Revise the word problems in textbooks or old tests so that they become mathematical modeling tasks. For example, students were asked to solve the original word problem at the top as part of an assessment. Simple math, right? Well, their teacher turned that word problem into a modeling problem that required students to demonstrate a deeper understanding of the math concept of percentages, while also requiring them to make a decision in a real-world context. Here's another example of a word problem that was turned into a modeling problem. Again, the original problem only requires students to use a formula to solve a math problem, while the modeling problem requires students to consider several variables, convert measurements, make assumptions, and explore several options in a real-world situation. Let's take a look at one more. The original problem requires the students to arrive at one correct answer, even though they might take a variety of approaches to get there. The modeling problem, on the other hand, transforms your classroom of students into a classroom of project managers, engineers, designers, and maybe even environmentalists. Students have to consider an array of variables and can arrive at many answers through a myriad of approaches. The end result is students understanding several math concepts and applying them to a real-world situation. Developing a mathematical mindset, one that includes a drive to represent problems with mathematical ideas to leverage the power of mathematics and problem solving, an interest in seeking both depth and breadth when understanding a problem by looking for patterns and connections across different situations is a capacity that will serve all students well in their educational pursuits and in their personal lives and in their professional careers. So although mathematical modeling may seem like a huge undertaking, the reality is that you can start big or start small, but just start. Know that it's open-ended and messy, but that it's good for student learning. Allow the messiness and give students the space to make genuine choices while working. When assessing students during mathematical modeling tasks, focus on the modeling process, not the work product. Use math calculation mistakes that occur during mathematical modeling tasks as teachable moments that don't negatively impact students' grades. This leads to the next principle. Although mathematical modeling assessment focuses on the process and not the product, students are still expected to engage in real math during modeling tasks. Modeling does not happen in isolation. One final principle that is often the most difficult for instructors is that instructors facilitate mathematical modeling tasks, but students are the leaders in this work. Let's peek into a 6th grade classroom to see math modeling in action.
In this lesson, modeling is a really important factor because we're taking a real world problem and we're applying math to it. And so we're modeling with mathematics based off a real world application. The students first looked at a video from the 2012 London Olympics of the 100-meter dash. They just asked them what they noticed about the video because it's really, when you're just watching the video or you're looking at the Olympics, you're not thinking about the math that's there, but there is math there.
Is there any math in this video?
The probability or chance of someone winning the race.
So then I put up a picture of the 3 winners, and it's clear that Usain Bolt is taller than the other 2 sprinters. And so the question naturally arises, did he win because of his height? Does he have an unfair advantage because he's taller? And so the students think that that is the case. And then we start to think about, well, is there a way to figure that out?
Raise your hand if you think that being tall would give you an advantage in sprinting. Well, that's a majority. Look at that. Almost every hand is raised. Why? Why do you think that being tall would give you an advantage if you're sprinting a distance?
We could test it out and see who wins. Like, if we tested this class, we could see who the tallest is and who would win.
You can use like past statistics of people that might have been like the same height.
We really want the students to think about what math could work here and what method could I use. In this particular lesson, students were starting out with ratios, and that was their initial model.
Can we set up a proportion?
A proportion would be a really good idea. What would that look like?
100 meters for the 100 meters time.
Some students turned it into a proportion. Some students did it a little differently. Some students looked at it in terms of running a percentage of what they ran overall. We're formulating a problem, and then we're creating a mathematical model to analyze and support a conclusion that may or may not work. And sometimes with modeling, you may start on a path that makes sense, but then you have to reanalyze the model that you apply to whatever the problem is or the math that you're using, and you may have to make adjustments, and that's okay too. That's all part of mathematical modeling. I'm listening for them to think about the problem in terms that they are comfortable with.
What do we need to do to this number, 1.96 meters, to get exactly how many times his height he ran?
You could divide 100 by 1.96.
Exactly.
If students are struggling with the model, then I would go back to some estimation and ask those questions to get them thinking about approximating an answer or looking for looking for a mathematical practice that would work for, or an application that would work for this type of problem. So you can guide them in those directions.
Is this distance is based on 1 second. This distance is based on, we don't know. So we know
this long divided by this long to try and figure out.
Right.
Sometimes it even sparks a new idea, and a student might be, well, we could try this, and then they can help each other.
And then his new distance he's running, which is 91.8 meters over a variable, and you solve it.
All too often, teachers are the ones saying, this is the way you should solve this problem. This is the math I want to see you use. And they're giving that students that one pathway. And we want students to kind of have multiple pathways to solve a problem. We really want students to have that kind of modeling experience because we want them to be global thinkers. We want them to be able to think on their own, and we want them to be able to see the math, not just in their math classroom. We want them to be excited about mathematics and look for the mathematics in order to prepare them better for the world around them.
Let's reflect once more. Where did you see opportunities for deeper student engagement through modeling? What challenges do you anticipate when bringing these tasks to your classroom? How might you adapt or scaffold a modeling task for different learners? Pause the video at this time. Mathematical modeling is the process of using mathematical tools and methods to analyze and solve real-world problems. There are many ways to incorporate mathematical modeling into your middle school classroom. It involves posing questions, constructing models, solving problems, interpreting results, and refining models as necessary. When selecting modeling approaches, consider the learning objectives, student needs, and available resources to ensure alignment with instructional goals. Mathematical modeling fosters critical thinking, problem solving, and real-world application skills essential for student success. Mathematical models promote the development of critical thinking, creativity, and mastery of mathematical knowledge and skills. Failure to utilize mathematical models puts students at a disadvantage in applying mathematics and deepening their understanding of mathematical concepts. By excluding mathematical modeling from lessons, students miss out on opportunities to relate mathematics to real life and learn from it more meaningfully. Thank you for completing Modeling Mathematics in Middle School. Please continue on and complete the check for understanding. Have a great day.